Why not?
So I wouldn't say I was nervous necessarily because I wanted to go to Paris for such a long time. It was more, if anything, it was like more anxious or like an excited, good, positive nerve. Um, that being said, I don't know if you can ever say that you're truly, fully prepared to study abroad because it's such a life-changing experience that when you get there, you'll just rise to the occasion.
Well, we were all close in age, but I can literally count on my hands, if that, the number of students of color that were in my program specifically, because I was in a traveling program. Um, there was really a lack of diversity in classrooms, in home spaces, in our communities. And so that made me venture out and actually try to find where I felt like I fit in, because oftentimes I didn't feel that.
I remember the first memory that came to mind was in the classroom where we were, I took a British women's literature class and we were discussing the role of movements, I guess, in speaking or giving voices to people who are oppressed. And at one point, we were talking about feminism because we were taking a trip to the feminist library, and I introduced the concept of intersectionality in addressing the fact that although women do share a common thread, that cultural piece distinguishes a lot of the experiences of women. And my classroom counterparts just they kind of got a little flustered because they felt like we should minimize, as black women, our identities to being just women. And I had to stand up and let them know, like, our experiences are shaped by our culture, by our racial background, by our socioeconomic status as well. And sometimes those contrasts for some people feel more significant than even the gender binary piece. And another time when I was in my housing unit, I heard the N word one time before. One of my roommates, she said it in her room. She was listening to music, and I overheard her. But because that was her private space, I was really upset. But I knew, that was her private space, and I didn't want to impose on that. And then there was another time where she just was in the kitchen, and she just said, "West Coast, nigga," just like that. And I was just like, I started fumbling over names, and I was just like, you can't say that. And she said, "I can say whatever I want." And I kind of was like, "No, you're not going to say that." And I felt like, started turning red, but there was that dynamic where it was necessary for me to say something and address that. And maybe she didn't feel like anybody would address her. So I went abroad during a time where the election campaign in the United States was at its height. I was actually abroad when the new president was elected, and I think that there was not a lot of room for people to discuss what those implications, what the implications of the presidential outcomes would, I don't know, mean for them. So a lot of the political situations that were happening in the United States, they really, really impacted us as black students. And I can remember us sitting in the lobbies together till 3 and 4 in the morning discussing what's been going on, sometimes with other peers that weren't in our group, but they were black students who were in our housing unit. I guess the most vivid memory I have is when the Terrence Crutcher shooting surfaced online, and I think we missed, me and Carmen, we had studied abroad together and we were two Howard students, but we missed Howard at that point because we knew that if something like that happened on campus, there was going to be a candlelight vigil, or there was going to be some type of discussion or some type of class or professor or someone you could go to speak about how seeing black bodies being gunned down on the screen of your phone might affect you. And when I was abroad, I don't think it was spoken about at all. And I just remember BBC or something being on the screen when we were going to class, and I saw it again. And it was as if like we couldn't really focus in class, but that was something that we had to address among ourselves. And I also feel like the staff members who are part of the program, as well as the teachers, have to be mindful of those dynamics in the way that they impact a student's ability to focus and work.
Just diversifying these programs, making it financially available to students of color, but also preparing them for these settings, because statistically it is shown that these are one dominated by females, but also whites in these specific study abroad field, and even in the field of international education, which we don't even talk about. So making students of color everywhere able to go abroad and want to go abroad and know how to go abroad, I think is the most detrimental part of study abroad. Okay, thank you.
I think the best thing that you all might be able to do is to make sure that the students kind of interact with each other. So if that means like splitting up the schools and making sure that the students like hang out with one another, in order to maybe like lessen the likelihood that cliques will form. Maybe that's the best thing you could do, just so we can try to have more cultural understanding.